right, everyone. Nick from ResoNix Sound Solutions here. I am in the middle of Wisconsin, in the middle of the winter. It's 10 degrees outside at 10 p.m. and I decided it would be a good idea to do a installation spotlight because we have something pretty unique out here. This one is going to be on you. Who are you and what do you got?
Well, before I say that, I was actually making fun of my friend earlier because he was ice fishing. And here we are talking about car stereos standing in a parking lot, 10 degree weather. So
yeah.
Anyways, my name is Ekern, and I am here to kind of show an impromptu quick spotlight on my Lexus CT 200. So we'll make the outside real quick here.
Yeah, because
it's really cold
right now. Wow. You know what? I'm going to pull out my light for this one. So what do we have here?
This is how you fit 14 channels of AB and one channel of Class D, plus a computer and a processor and a bunch of power distribution in the spare tire area in a Lexus hatchback.
Wow.
Which is basically a Prius. I haven't done the trimming out on it yet because there's going to be a little bit of equipment change, but there's also 4 tube buffers as well. 8 channels of tube buffing and a battery over in the corner, which is kind of tucked away right now. But we can go inside and I can tell
let's
you about
go
it a
inside
bit.
And talk about it. Oh my God, it is so goddamn cold. Oh, for those wondering why I'm even here, this is my RV and I am going cross country to go snowboarding for the entire winter. Let me knock off my shoes real quick. All right. So, let's go on about your trunk and then we'll show the rest of it.
Okay, so
you know what? Can we put on the light?
Sure.
Actually?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
You know what? There's some water. Let me just clean that off real quick.
A little frost.
All right. Yeah, the camera lens is probably frozen already.
Sure.
So what's going on back there? Why 14 channels? Okay. Why the 2 buffers? What's going on?
Well, I guess to back up a little bit, this is the first time I did my own system in literally 20 years.
Okay.
The last time I did a system was in a 1998 240SX for my own personal use. And that was in 2004, sold it in 2005 when I opened my business, and since then I've been a zillion audio systems for other people, and a couple of years ago I decided, why am I not just doing an audio system for myself?
Yeah.
It's about time. And I was going to take basically what I did is, there's kind of the proverbial car audio rule book. I decided to throw that out the window and kind of just try some new shit.
Do something totally different.
Yeah. So anyways, back in the trunk, to fit, I had those amplifiers. I've been kind of playing around with it because I had like a half-ass system in this and another car. And so I just got some more. They're actually Zapco SQ amplifiers.
Okay.
But to fit them in that location.
Is that what they are?
Yeah. That's the boards they are. And, whatever your opinion is about the Zapco stuff or whatever, I had the amplifiers, I had a connection for them, so I was like, I'm just going to stick with those. But in order to fit them in there, I'm like, I got to do something crazy. So I built my own chassis out of 2040 aluminum extrusion and took the boards out of the chassis, mounted them up to the extrusion. So that's why it's all like one giant equipment rack, and all that comes out with 4 bolts. That entire system, or that entire equipment rack. I then I'm like, I want to play around with some tubes. So a lot of my audiophile friends have tube home systems, all from preamp, amplifier, analog front end, and I got a little tube buffer and I put it on the mids, and I'm like, wow. I really like what that does. So I'm like, why don't I do some tube buffers on all the high frequency channels? So everything that's, basically from about 140 hertz on up runs through a 12AX7 tube, which will be changed soon. I'm putting in some different buffers because these have a little bit of a noise issue at times, and tubes in general don't like the cold, which we experienced a little bit. But
it's a little cold.
Yeah. But anyways, So to fit all that in, I also wanted to do something a little bit different on the front end because car audio DSPs, they are somewhat limited in what they can do compared to what's out there in other markets. So I wanted to, that's why I'm using the Mac Mini, because it opens up a whole world of DSP capability.
Which is right here, right?
Yeah, this is this is just a 7-inch screen that is interfaced with the Mac Mini. Normally, I didn't bring it along. I mentioned I have an iPad up here that extends this screen, so my mouse pad actually controls the iPad.
Okay.
So it's actually like I have 2 screens. And then for some reason, my music app came up here. I'm gonna close that. But I run Autorvana, which is it's a home app for organizing your music library. Both local files, and I stream Kobas on it. And that's all controlled from the mouse touchpad here. I can do some basic control. This actually is getting all changed out because it's way too cluttered. I'm simplifying it. I can do a lot of control from just a couple knobs, moving the touchpad, and just kind of cleaning this up. I was trying to get this finished for SVR last year, and it wasn't coming together quite right. And I was just like, you know what, I'm going to change it up a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's been that way since, because I've been working on finishing up the automation and everything. So I actually had it out the other day and didn't bother screwing it all back together.
I'm going to give you guys a little heads up. I mean, I don't know what comes through on video, but I will tell you this. It's almost, if it's something really nice, it's never comes through on video as nice as it is. This really does look great. The fabrication on it is super solid.
One thing that'll have, if you want to check it out, the Lexan that has the lenticular lens mesh behind it, or what's the effect? I can't remember, the name slipped my mind. Like, you can see where I extended the lines into the Lexan. You can see that like on all the knobs. And actually right here, it didn't come through real well. I'm sure you won't be able to see it on video, but it says I'm an analog man in a digital world. So I've been.
Is that what that says?
Yeah,
that little writing?
Yeah, so I've kind of been.
Yeah, it's not. It's having trouble focusing on it just because it's so close. But that's pretty funny. And then you got the 11.5 now?
Oh yeah, it's 11.5, and according to, I was told that's actually 11 to the square root of a half. Who told me that? Acura Legend guy.
Harry Kimura.
I
had a feeling it was going to be
He's like, yeah, there's a mathematician. I would have pointed out that's actually half the power, whatever, to 11. I'm like, whatever, it's 11.5. Most people look at it. So there's actually a lot of movie play stuff in the install, and but kind of hard to show some of the stuff at this time of day. So
yeah,
and there'll be more of it as the installation evolves, but. Anyways, the elephant in the room is the...
now that we kind of see them in frame, why don't
the big ass... they're...
What do you want to call them? Big ass? Just big ass?
Big ass. I don't know what I was going to do. There's a lot of forced perspective with them.
So I will say this. Most people watching this are probably not familiar with these, but like have seen photos of these on Facebook. They are not as big in person as they seem. I got it, and that was the first thing I think I said to you. I was like, oh, these aren't as ridiculous. I mean, they are ridiculous, but like, they're not as ridiculous as I thought they would be. It's a MTM alignment, but it's a little bit different than like standard even. Again, like the fabrication on it and like how it's all done is insane. I don't know what you guys are going to be able to see in video, but it's done really well. Eric, I will let you kind of take over and explain what's even going on here.
Okay. Well, I wanted to. What made me want to experiment. Well, let me back up a second. The whole reason I decided to experiment a little bit with Dipole is because I told you I was kind of putzing around with the stereo, and I had some wide bands in the dash, and I had some underseat mid basses, and it's like, I want to do something a little better. And when I took one of those wide bands out of the dash one night, I actually I took them both out, and I set them both up on the dash, just kind of like this. And normally that just sounds like absolute garbage. But since I had the mid basses going, and they were and they're on axis, and I was just middle of the night one night, and I'm like, there's something to this if it's done right. Because there was a crazy amount of three-dimensional space that was going on, three-dimensional things that it was really hard to do in a car audio system. And I'm like, be really hard to get the placement just right because I kind of started twisting them and stuff. And I'm like, well, you know what? Why not build some robot arms? You know, so
that's what you do, right?
I mean, well, that's kind of what I do. It's what I went back to. I have a degree in automation, and I'm like, I grew up doing RC cars. And if you know anything about RC cars, you'll notice there's actually a few RC car parts built into these, and that's where some of the stuff comes from. Some servos and a stepper motor and all that kind of stuff, but. So I started experimenting, and first I started with just some camera mounts, and I put some speakers out here and was playing around with angles, and like, man, this would be really cool if I could just make it so I could adjust them in real time. And that is coming right now. I have a manual controller that I use to adjust what's called the azimuth and also the extension. But the stepper motors I don't have hooked up right now. They're just fixed in position. But the automation programming, I actually just finished the base programming the other night. And by the time I hit Xpone, I'll have that up and running, and there'll be a little touchscreen here, and it'll walk you through the preset. It'll put the speakers in position based on your height, and it'll also change the DSP preset at the same time. From this little touchscreen.
That's pretty crazy.
And I showed Troy the concept for the touchscreen, and again, it's kind of movie themed, so it'll be fun. People will get a kick out of it. Don't
spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil it. So, but
because we'll do a follow up.
Oh yeah, there will definitely be. We'll do a follow up. I'm going to be at Red River Shootout. Is that what it's called?
Aggieland. Red River. Yeah, I'll be there.
Yeah. So I should have.
Maybe I'll show up with that for you.
Yeah, I'll have it much further along, and it'll be daytime, and we can go a little more in depth into it.
And it won't be fucking negative 20 degrees outside.
So, yeah.
I don't know how you people. Let me pause you for a second.
How you people?
Who the fuck lives here? Why is there civilization here? This is insane.
Every person that lives here kind of feels the same way about this time of year. They're like, why do we do this?
Where I'm going after this, which is only a few hours away, is going to be negative 15 degrees tonight, and like apparently that's normal for them. Go somewhere else.
Right. Well,
but here I am going there, so I mean, I guess I can't really talk shit.
It's a balmy 16 right now, and we're sitting in a parking lot at a Planet Fitness talking about stereos. So I mean, we're normal, right? A couple other things I did in the car. One, I did like as much suede conversion as I could because I wanted to tame the interior reflections. Like the headliner's done. Obviously, the dash, I'm going to do a custom dash mat. That's just a prefab one at this time. But different panels throughout the back were converted over to suede, just little trim panels, all that kind of stuff. And you'll notice inside the car, just hearing me talk, it's not very reverberant inside this car. When I initially got it done, I got in and I'm like, it feels like I'm in a vocal booth or something. And there's more of that coming, but I may actually do some stuff on the seats and everything, but we'll see. Okay. Time is kind of the big thing for me right now.
Time is the enemy of everything, it seems like.
Another thing, so anyways, I could talk for hours about the different renditions and stuff.
Why don't we talk about this? Explain what these are, why they are like this. Okay. Let's start there.
Well, an MTM is a
which stands for mid-range tweeter,
mid-range. It was originally developed by a guy named Joseph Dipole. It's called Dipole arrangement as well. And his concept, and I'm not an engineer, so this is from what I remember reading, actually probably a couple years ago, is to control the directivity to make a very wide dispersion speaker with narrow horizontal directivity. Vertical. Very wide horizontal, narrow vertical dispersion. And it creates a very low, or a very tight lobe where like the driver summation is, very, very good along that axis. The odd thing about it is dipole speakers, they radiate in a figure 8 shaped pattern, and the theory, and what happens is there's almost perfect cancellation at the 90-degree axis points. In theory, again, it's not perfect, but so it's kind of when you take a very wide radiation pattern and you have it cancel on either side, have excellent phase summation coming in this kind of narrow beam. It creates it's a point source that isn't as affected because there's
by
good cancellation. It's not as affected by the surroundings. So having it this close to the window, what you don't hear is this like crazy like reflection off that window or anything. So there's a lot of hypothesis that went into this, and in order to do it, I knew I would want to be able to kind of move the speakers. It's almost like a focus control on a camera, on an old manual camera. And when it's just right, the speakers like completely disappear, and it's just this sound field that's in front of you. And, you know, I know I gave you a little bit of a demo tonight, but it's not, you know, I've been playing around with the tuning. It's not quite where I'd like it right now. In fact, I know there's a lot more. I haven't even really tapped the iceberg on some of the DSP stuff.
Let me cut you off for a second. So one of the big things that people critique me on in these videos that I do is people say, oh, like, well, the worst one is like, oh, why don't you get a recording of the car? No, that doesn't work. But another thing is people say like, well, why don't you give your thoughts on it? Troy was actually a big proponent of that. He's like, you know, why don't you at least like give your thoughts on it? I will give my thoughts on this, mostly because there is a lot of chatter in the messages, and there's like people that are like skeptical, like, what the fuck is this guy doing? This is ridiculous. I wasn't sure what to expect. I knew that, again, like the fabrication was really cool and the idea behind it was very interesting, but I was like, who the hell knows if something like this is really gonna work? I can sit here and say, this car sounds really good. Like, this car sounds really good. If it was my personal car, there would be some tonality tweaks. Outside of that, it's rock solid. It does, you know, it has a really deep soundstage. It gets wide. It doesn't sound like the speakers are as close as they are. It doesn't sound like they're, you know, I guess as far away from the, like, you know, horizontal boundaries as they are. It actually stages, you know, at the windshield, like the apex of like the dash and windshield, but it gets high, it gets wide, and it doesn't really falter from there. It's actually, as soon as I listened to it, I was like, oh shit, this is real. Like, he's not full of shit, for anyone wondering. You know, this isn't just one of those crazy fucking weirdos you see online. I'll make you know, like that one guy on DIY Mobile Audio, you know, that's a crazy person whose car most definitely does not sound good. This is a crazy person whose car absolutely does sound good. And what he's doing here, whether it's even doing what he wants or not, I have no idea, but I can tell you what the sound is. It's very good. And I even asked him, I was like, he played the first track, I was like, hey, are there like rear speakers in here? Because it's also like doing some really crazy stuff with width and depth, and like you feel like very different things that like you normally wouldn't in a standard setup. And he's like, no rear speakers. I don't know if he's lying or not.
No, there's no rear speakers.
Yeah, because some people fucking lie about that stuff. But it's a very, this is something, I mean, outside of like how big it is, I'm more of a subtle and like hidden type person. But as far as the sound goes, I would have zero problem with this being my car. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah.
It's funny, you know, there was a lot of just about, and that's why, I don't know if people will probably remember, it was probably 5-6 months ago. I was kind of talking about the system, and I said, hey, I got something that's kind of cool. And you know, when I was talking to Clifton on the podcast,
yeah, you were doing like teasers.
Doing little teasers things. Because I knew people would just think I was like that guy on DIY Audio, who I have no idea who you're talking about, but I know the personality.
The people who know will know.
I knew if I didn't have someone that had some frame of reference listen to it before I kind of showed what I was doing, they'd all just think I was a Unabomber.
Yeah.
You know, like you know, go live out in the woods and do whatever.
I just listened to a really good podcast on him. That was great. Anyway.
But so having Troy listen to it, and Troy and I were acquaintances. We'd met like once, and I'm like, hey, you want to listen to my car?
Yeah.
You know? And
Troy's like, one of my customers, by the way.
Troy
lives in the area.
But hey, Troy. He.
Hey, Ellie.
Yeah. Hey, Ellie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I went over there, or I went there, and just like, yeah, I'm in the area, you want to listen to it? And we listened for like, I don't know, like probably an hour and a half straight. And I was playing, we got a lot more in depth, and you were talking about the kind of the crazy phase stuff it'll do. That's one thing it really will pull out is a lot of recordings. If you've done any near field listening with monitors, you realize how much whacked out phase stuff that the whoever's mixing it or mastering it or whatever, what they put into it, that a lot of systems don't do. Yeah. And that's one of the things I wanted to do is when I've listened to ultra high-end systems, a buddy of mine's got some of the big Magicos, and I've been over to his house listening to him, and they do some crazy shit that you're just like, whoa. And that's one of the things I wanted to do was take the car out of it as much as possible and kind of recreate that. And I'm getting there. It's, it keeps getting better, and then I make some sort of hardware change and I got to retune things. And but I'm kind of finally settled in on the geometry for the MTMs. And now I can just go, once I get, I still have some hardware stuff to do, but I'm fully into these and tuning them, taking them as far as I can get them. And like I said, I haven't even really tapped into the DSP stuff I want to get into. I'm just doing some pretty basic DSP right now.
So yeah, I mean, it seems like what you're trying to do is essentially remove the reflections that are causing us to know, like, we're listening in a car right now. And again, listening to it, that's what it's doing. It is doing that. Maybe not as good as like a $500,000 home system, but it's definitely not an average or even better than average car audio system. And I think it's doing a good job at, again, however you did this. Like, I think it might be working.
Yeah, we'll get there. It's going to evolve.
Tell me more about like what the speakers are and like, maybe tell me what the speakers are, and like, is there any sort of tricks? Like, did you just place these on a baffle? Because I know you didn't. Because there's definitely some directivity things going on here. There's definitely spacing things going on. Why don't you educate some people about what's really happening?
Okay. First off, I started reading a lot of Siegfried Linkwitz's stuff on his website. Fortunately, he's passed away, I think back in 2018, but his website is still a wealth of knowledge for people that want to learn about dipole theory, learn about the work that he did. And the strange thing is he was a brilliant mechanical, or I think he was a type of engineer. He wasn't even like an audio engineer, and he did the audio stuff as a hobby.
Really?
And just kind of took things.
We're talking about the guy that invented the Linkwitz
Riley
crossover.
Riley crossover slope is named after him and another gentleman, obviously. But he started playing around with stuff and started coming up with these whack out of the box speakers, and started offering them as kits and plans and everything. And now his LX521 it was like Absolute Sounds, post-mortem, it's like Absolute Sounds Speaker of the Year or something like that last year.
And they're not even expensive.
Yeah, they're like $20,000, I think, now, ready to go.
Oh, those ones. I thought you meant like one of the kits from Metasound or something.
Well, this is the LX521 ready to go. I think if you buy it in kit version, it's, I think, around $3 or $4 grand for everything.
It's like not that much money for something that's apparently very good.
Yeah, you're building like a world-class speaker. Anyways, I took a lot of what he said about the radiation pattern, the cancellation, and what really kind of drew me to it is he said, as far as positioning those speakers, is like you'll always position your first reflection point, or as far as aiming the speakers at the the null, where the null is created, and it gives you kind of that point source while minimizing that first reflection. And I've taken a microphone, I actually posted a video just using my phone, and you can hear it with your ear too. You can be right here and the speaker's just blasting at you, and you move your head right here and it's like silent. You're like, whoa, it's kind of creepy.
Yeah.
And then you go around the back and it comes back to life. And obviously it's not a perfectly symmetrical phase cancellation, because what's coming off the back of the speakers is obviously not exactly the same as what's coming off the fronts.
Yeah, but it's close.
But it works really well. And one of the other things I really wanted to do was minimize any panel excitation. Do you know anything about resonances and panel excitation?
No, tell me about resonance.
Okay.
I've never.
Well, it's probably the most significant distortion that we battle in car audio.
Really? Never would have guessed. It's not like I've been telling people that for
I know this guy who sells this stuff. I can't remember where he's from. I think the West Coast. But
West Coast.
Yeah.
Actually, again, I'm talking shit, but that's where I'm going right now.
You go there to visit, not to live.
Yeah.
But I wanted to minimize any sort of excitation of panels. Normally, the door panel or an A-pillar or dash panel, they're all used as a baffle for the speaker. And I don't care, you know, how much damping you put on it, whatever, it's still gonna, you know, it's still gonna make that panel ring. And that, you know, the level of it goes down, you know, essentially it's like a, you know, lower level of distortion, but it's still always there. And when you, with the dipole arrangement, obviously I'm not exciting any panel directly other than the baffle. And you can put your fingers on this, we were talking about this earlier. These don't play very low. But there's absolutely no vibration. You can, even putting your fingers right on the speakers, it's kind of a, I remember the first time I saw a set of Logan Martins, I'm like, where's the sound coming from? Because there's nothing vibrating like you're normally seeing a big woofer. Now that obviously works to a certain frequency because of the cancellation. You're not going to get much low mid-range out of these or anything. But those hand off to, as far as the speakers real quick, I'll give you those. These are inexpensive speakers. These are Tectonic BMRs. I think the model's like the T460 or something like that. They call it a 3-inch driver. It's actually about a 2-inch driver. When I auditioned in the first generation, I just had a mid-tweet setup.
I would normally never touch anyone's speaker, but I know these things.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I keep spares because they're so cheap. So
they're like, aren't they like $12?
These I think I picked up for like, I think they're like $16 a piece or something like that.
Yeah.
I got 6 more at home. These ones are matched.
These are proof of concept, and then he's going to make them with Accuton speakers.
Accutons are a little too big, man.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. When I used several well-known conventional cone speakers, and when I went to the original BMRs, originally I used like the 3.5, a single 3.5 in the tweeter. When I switched to the BMR, I'm like, whoa, that's a night and day difference, because these again have they don't beam like conventional speakers do.
Yeah.
They have a much wider radiation pattern at higher frequencies, and again, I think that helps. Of course, it kind of supports that cancellation, you know, that happens on either side, or, you know, on the 90-degree points.
It allows the dipole to work more effectively.
Right.
Yeah.
The wider the dispersion, all of a sudden, the better that cancellation is. So it's kind of almost seems counterintuitive, but it works.
Yeah.
The tweeters, cheap. Dayton AMT Mini 8s. I think they're around $40 a piece or something like that.
Yeah.
There's one front and back.
So there's one on the front and one in the back firing backwards, right? I don't even know if I could see it, but that's where it is.
And those, they almost, you know, they only play from about 7K on up.
Okay.
So they're almost playing like a super tweeter, but these, you know, don't start to lose their radiation until, you know, even higher than that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so these are inexpensive, and then my other speakers are kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Down low, I don't know if you get your light.
Yep.
Are some rather unusual kick panels. Again, they go back to, I didn't want to excite the panel or excite the interior panels. So they actually, you can see the larger clear baffle around the perimeter.
Yep.
That is open to the back. If you, I don't know if you want to let the elements in, but you can open the door a little bit and show the side.
Let me see for a second. Oh, it's freezing. Yep.
But they actually breathe out the sides.
Real. So it's coming out right here.
The back wave is coming out vented through there.
Okay. Interesting.
And I just remember the name of the grill pattern. It's a Muari pattern. It kind of shifts when you move back and forth.
Yeah.
It's a geometric shift.
Why are you venting them out of the sides? What's going on there?
Try to minimize panel excitation once again.
Okay.
I don't know if you noticed at all. I know when Troy listened to the car, he mentioned it. You don't realize that there's speakers in the kick panels. A lot of times, you know, you feel the tactile sensation of a speaker like beating against your foot, and that's because everything around it is being, you know, storing energy from the speaker.
Yep.
And I wanted to minimize that, and I didn't need them to play that deep because I already had some mid basses under the seats. So I was like, I'm going to try. You know, these are a true mid range. This is their 6.5-inch mid range.
What is it?
It's a Purify PTT 65M, which is a paper cone, mid-range, ultra-low distortion, yada, yada, yada. There's tons of third-party tests on them and everything, and they're just they're taking the speaker world by storm. These are the first ones I got, from Purify. And when I heard these, I was like, these are like the most well-behaved, non-attention calling to themselves speakers I've ever had. And I previously had some hybrid audio LS or L8 SEs under the seats, and I'm like, man, they got those 8-inch mid basses. I called Matasound. I'm like, hey, can you guys give me a set of those? And they're on back order. So I said, yeah, give me some. And then they announced the 10s, and I'm like, man, why don't you put me down for 2 more of those, two of those? So it has quickly gone from real budget stuff
to some crack deal.
Yeah,
that's all right.
Yeah, and Matasound's like 2 hours away, so it's a pretty quick jaunt, and I'm on a first name basis with the guys. So, but those have worked really well in that when you don't, without that box loading or that panel pressure loading of the speaker, it just lends to a level of transparency that's really hard to obtain in a car. So
before we even allow someone to grab onto that and be like, oh, I'm gonna just stick a mid-bass driver in my kick panel that vents everywhere, why wouldn't you do that in a typical installation?
Okay, well, one, you're not getting much mid-bass out of them. These only play from they only need to play down to about 150. That's where my underseat mid-basses take over. If you're not,
so it's really not even a mid-bass. It's a
mid-range. Yeah, it's a true mid-range, and the true mid-range has less X-Max. The trade-off is it's much more efficient. So, the Purify speakers aren't that efficient. That's probably the one downside. You need a lot of power, but the mid-range, this particular mid-range, is a much more efficient speaker. It's a much lighter cone than their mid-bass drivers.
Lower X-Max, but not needed.
Right.
So yeah, why wouldn't in a normal application, a normal mid-bass in the kicks application, you need it to get down to 60 hertz.
Right.
Does this have any shot of doing that?
Here's the one trick. The way they are right now, they start to roll off around 100 hertz, and I only play them down to about 150. I can tighten that gap that you saw, and almost tune the speaker a little bit. As an installer, you're not supposed to do it, but I've had when I was thinking about it, I thought about how many times I've had a speaker playing and I stuck it in the hole where it's being mounted. It goes where it's out here and it's absolute sounds like garbage. And the more you put it in there, all of a sudden the bass starts to come up. Yeah. And I actually did it on that side. I wanted just a little bit more bottom end out of it, and I moved that one in about 1/4 inch, and the graph went, it just came right up. Okay. But I would not do this if this was your only mid-bass. If this was the speaker designed to do mid-bass, it's not going to do that.
And what about, I guess we can come back to these. Would you do the same thing in a normal application where you're allowing the back of the mid-range to interact with the front?
Probably not. Yeah. This is not
very specific application.
Yeah, this is kind of a concept testing different ideas. It's not designed to ever, be. If someone else wants to try it, more power to them. It's an exercise, labor of love. It is definitely not something I would ever expect to become mainstream or anything like that, because it's very difficult to do. Obviously, a lot of time and integration, to make it happen, and we'll see. Is the juice worth the squeeze? It's getting there.
I would say it's getting there.
So, I'm pretty. I'm
not saying it's a perfect sound system, but it's a very good sound system.
It's getting there, and it's actually, you're hearing it tonight. 10 degrees out. The car was ice cold when I brought it over. And tonally, there was a couple things that I wasn't super. Someone's doing donuts in the parking lot here.
Oh, let's see if we can get them.
So,
get it. I was actually doing donuts in this thing when I was still in New York. I was like, let me see how it does in the snow. We got. Oh, here he goes. Here he goes.
Let's see if he's. Come on, do
let's
it.
see him smack into a telephone pole. Come on, get it.
That didn't help. There we go.
Yeah.
Oh, that one wasn't as good as the one he did the other way.
What kind of car is that?
Is that a Saturn?
I don't know.
Hey man, we're in Wisconsin. There's nothing to do. So.
Yeah, there's nothing to do besides just hang out in a Planet Fitness park. Oh, he's going backwards. Look at This guy's having a fucking blast.
Told you we'd have a good time.
Oh my God. But yeah, New York, I wanted to see. I was like, I'm traveling across the country to go snowboarding, and I'm bringing this thing. I was like, and we got one day of snow. I was like, you know what, let me go see how it does. And I was in an empty parking lot. I was like, can I do donuts in this thing?
Hey man, you got to test the goods, otherwise he's going for it, man.
Dude, he's really going.
He knows we're watching now. So
yeah.
Just don't smack into me, man. Is that a sign? I don't know what that is.
Oh, don't hit Hubert.
Yeah, there's a lot of cars on that side. I just hope he doesn't smoke something.
Oh,
there's a big berm over there. I was hoping he'd kind of smoke that, but anyways, nothing to do in Wisconsin, folks.
Cheese and snowboarding on ice. That's about it.
Pretty much. So, anyways, we were kind of.
Wait, is that him? Did he just hit the curb
Did he?
Office Depot?
He might have.
I think he just hit the curb and he's going again. Oh my God.
He's not going to learn until he smacks into something good.
Yeah, it's probably going to be my RV. You know what?
Yeah, we hope not.
Anyways, we'll just ignore him for now.
Yeah,
do we have another one? Nope, we don't. They're being mature.
It was a really good idea at the time. But
anyways.
Yeah, so train of thought. So yeah, a lot of concepts that I wouldn't recommend you just go do if you're gonna do an average system. It'll sound like crap.
Or even above average system. Yeah. I would, 100 times out of 100, I wouldn't recommend this. The only time the reason I say that is, I know I said it's really good, but now you're gonna say, oh, but you said 100 times out of 100 you wouldn't recommend it. That's because someone who has the capability to pull something like this off doesn't need my recommendation. So, 100 times out of 100, I wouldn't recommend this.
You know, in fact, if you told me I couldn't do it, that's actually part of what fueled. In many ways, I was mentioning I didn't really tell people about it and everything. When I did tell some people about it, there was a lot of people that are like, well, I even put some feelers out there. I'm like, has anybody ever done anything like this? And everyone's like, no, that won't work.
Yeah. I probably would have said, well, don't bother. Like, why?
And then I had one guy who kind of, after the cat was out of the bag and, you know, Troy had heard it and a few other people had heard it and everything. And he's like, dipoles don't work in a car.
Who is this?
I can't remember his name. He's on the groups. You know, I don't want to call anybody out, but I might get a T-shirt that says dipoles don't work in a car, and I'm gonna wear it like everywhere.
Yeah.
When I'm done with the car, I'm like, dipoles don't work in a car. I might even get a sticker on the back for exponents. Like, dipoles don't work in a car. And that'll kind of be my mantra, because everyone was telling me it wouldn't work, and I was like, you know what? I already kind of know it does, so I'm just gonna keep pushing ahead.
Yeah.
And
now, after listening to it, I would say it's not that it doesn't work. It's just, is the juice worth the squeeze to someone who's going to be doing it? 99.9% of people, absolutely not. You are a crazy person. To you, it's worth it.
I mean, people will ask me, like, well, you've probably experienced this your whole life in car audio. Mm-hmm. People are like, so what do you do? And you're like, well, I do audio systems. And they're like, oh, you're like that Pimp My Ride show? And you're just like, you want to punch them.
Yeah. What I do is I tell people, I work on cars. Actually, I don't have to do that anymore. I can just say, now it's weird. I own an automotive soundproofing materials company. That sounds weird too. Mm-hmm. So like, I own an e-commerce business. I just generalize it because it's almost not even worth talking about to your average person.
Right. And then they'll be like, oh, you install stairs. I'm like, well, I do something a little different. And I'll get to the point where I just kind of see their eyes glossing over. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, do you really want to know? I'm like, why don't I just show you? Mm-hmm. And they're usually just look at me like I should, like, you know, I'm batshit crazy.
Be institutionalized?
Be institutionalized. You know.
I think all of us should, to some degree.
I think there's a lot of people in this industry that could be diagnosed with certain...
Or hobby.
Yeah.
Hobby, hobby, not industry.
In this hobby that could be diagnosed with certain disorders that, you know, they kind of scoot by under the radar because they hang out with other guys that have the same situation. But, anyhow, and then from the kick panels, they hand off to the 8-inch mid bases that are under the seat. And when the response I got out of the under seats, you know, they start to roll off pretty hard about 160 on the top end, and they get real wonky above that.
It's typical for under seat.
but the low end response, how deep they played, was pretty obnoxious. The hybrids that I had in here, which I measured, they were quoted having an FS at about 40. They'd start, rolling off about them, whatever. But when I actually measured them, they actually had an FS of about 60 hertz.
Doesn't surprise me.
And I was like, okay, and they were good, but occasionally they'd make some mechanical noises. I originally had them magnet up, and I actually inverted them to try to reduce the mechanical noise, and it helped a little bit, but they would reach their limits a little bit. After getting these kick panels, or the mids and the kick panels, I was like, I got to get these 8s. I read the review of the 8s on Hi-Fi Compass, the measurements and all that stuff.
Some
I'm like,
data.
I got to get them. Yeah, it's all objective measurements, and then he kind of gives, it's kind of like Aaron's reviews. He gives a little bit of subjective stuff, but I'm like, let's do it. And when I got these babies in there and I measured the response, and they had a rising response to subsonic.
The 8's under the seat. The 8-inch purifies under the seat.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they still played up, under the seats up into about the same range, and that's where I think the car takes, or just the position of them takes over. They roll off about 160. And started playing them, and I'm like, oh my God, I have subwoofers in the front, even though I don't have a front sub that plays subsonic. And I can run these with no high pass, and I'm running about 300 watts per right now. That's what it's rated. It's actually probably a little less than that. And the woofers don't give up. The amplifier gives out before the woofers do, and they just keep getting louder
even
and
with
louder.
No high pass.
And even though high pass,
wow.
And then the amplifiers will start to give out. So I'm running them on a 30 hertz high pass right now, and I will be upgrading the amplification that goes to them with some of the equipment swap that I have going on. I'll go from about rated 300 to about rated 500.
Okay.
And it'll be, it's a newer design amplifier and everything, so it should be definitely a little more powerful. But so I'm looking forward to that. I'll also, right now, I'm just running 4-ohm load on the subwoofer amplifier. It's that CS 10 that you heard.
The L26 ROY.
Right.
Great sub. Great sub.
That's only getting about 400 watts right now. So when I switch over, that's the next step. Is I will, as soon as it's not 10 degrees here, I'll be doing some fiberglass work and putting 2 purified 10s back there in place of the single CS 10 and loading the amp down a little bit more too. So it's actually a 1-ohm amp, so it's not even breaking a sweat right now running a 4-ohm. So I'll be running at 2. So it should still be happy. That was another thing, kind of tangent here, but the amplifiers, when I put them in the 2040 extrusion, I have that plumbed for liquid cooling, and I've absolutely not had to use it all summer long.
Well, it's also like freezing here.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say all summer long, I was wailing.
What does it hit, like 40 degrees in the summer?
On a good day, 40 degrees Celsius. But no, like hot days, I never had an amp shut down. I've just been wailing on it. So
that's good.
Yeah, it works pretty good. There's
this is your daily driver, right?
This is my almost daily driver. I do have a work vehicle, so this sits sometimes. If I'm doing a utilitarian trip, I definitely don't take this.
Yeah, this thing is crazy though. Can you show us these things moving?
Yeah. To make fun of my little manual controller here right now, this is my little RC car battery, an umbilical, and a voltage regulator.
Oh my God.
And
this is where I am going to call it. Yeah, you need to be institutionalized.
Yeah, this is all going away, and there'll be a small touchscreen right here that will control this, and the coding is done for it. I got some animation on it, and it's going to be kind of fun. It'll guide people through it when they get in for a demo and everything. Okay. But like this, I just have the servo control with this. The stepper motor is not active right now, but like, normal listening position, would be, I'd never turn them in that far. Normal listening position is more like that.
Move them all the way like in again? Oh my God.
Number 5 is live.
And they go up and down in the pillar, right?
They will go up and down when the stepper motors are working. This is actually a worm drive stepper motor.
Okay.
The stepper motor is down in the base of the A-pillar. And so I will be able to, you can look over here, I can manually move them. But this will actually, move up and down as fast or as slow as I want it to. And they'll actually dock when I'm, they'll go all the way down, fully retract, and they should sit right about here when I'm, fully parked.
Really?
Yeah. So they'll be out of the way. Cool. And this is kind of set up. I set them up. These are XT30 connectors because I can take this whole thing out if I need to do any service work. It's literally just 4 screws and this whole arm comes out.
Really?
And I can work on them out of the car. Every pivot point in here, I didn't really get into this before, is all ball bearing supported. So people ask about vibration and everything, and I've, in the automation stuff, I work on very high precision machines, automated manufacturing machines and whatnot, and it's all linear slides and bearings and everything. And when things are tight tolerances and they're bearing supported, there's not a lot of vibration that happens.
Yeah. We went for a drive. Like you drove me around in this car, and I think I heard like a little creak, but that might just because it's freezing outside.
Yeah, that's one thing.
Everything creaks and rattles when it's this cold out.
Yeah, when you have a quiet car in the summer and all of a sudden it's got creaks and rattles when it gets cold.
Yeah.
So
I get very upset at my car when I drive it in the winter. I'm like, this is insane. And I'm like, I need to buy like an S-Class because there's no way I can deal with this.
Yeah.
But then summer hits and it's like, oh, this is a very quiet car.
Yeah. Early 2000s BMW convertibles, don't buy them if you want a semi-quiet car.
No.
They are the rattliest. I had a couple in the early 2000s. And
I actually went for a drive-in one over the summer when I was visiting various companies that I do business with, and Thomas from Micro Precision owns an early 2000s BMW Z4 convertible. And
it feels like it's falling apart.
It sounds not even like it's falling apart. It sounds like it is actively exploding. Like everything sounds like it's like, again, falling apart violently. But I think we hit like what, 180 on the auto? No, probably, no. Was it 180? No. I think I converted it to miles per hour. I think we hit like 145 on the Autobahn. And I honestly thought I was going to die.
I've been on the Autobahn. It's a little sketchy. I was in...
Not from the speed. I thought like the car was going to be responsible for my death. But, so yeah.
Yeah. Lots of rattles. Anyways, yeah, so...
Any last bits of craziness that you want to show off, or?
The next time you see it, this will be changed. This is going to be a little more refined, a little less cluttered. This was actually built as a MIDI controller, and I've discovered that a lot of the stuff I wanted to control using the MIDI, because of the software I'm using and everything, it's not allowing that connection to happen. So I'm kind of going back to the drawing board a little bit, changing some things around. I like knobs, and I want to be able to adjust. You know how like when you're on a computer and you're trying to EQ by ear, and you got your mouse clicked on the dot and you're kind of moving the, your slider up and down, but you really have no context. There's no tactile feel of like how much you're moving it. I want a knob where I can control EQ bands, and that's one of my main priorities. So I'll have one knob that I can just click on an EQ band and adjust.
What do these do currently?
Currently, these were set up to all be MIDI controlled into different EQ bands.
Oh, okay. So this was like an EQ?
Yes, this was an EQ.
It's like a clarion EQ, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like an old school analog knob EQ, but obviously the downside is very easy to bump, and it didn't communicate through this software because this closes off the architecture of the audio. You can't get in there and communicate with certain things. This one right here was a little bit different. This was a gain adjustment for the rear tweeter.
Okay.
So
which
I could
one is the
adjust
one
it
off?
independently. Yeah, this one. This is my volume control that was actually harvested out of the digital controller for my mini DSP, which I then moved to the board. I 3D printed some stuff. Moved it up there, and then put the rotary encoder down here, so I can still control everything up here. I can go through, change my presets, change my subwoofer level, all that kind of stuff. But it's just umbilical down here. And then these, I never did get hooked up. These were going to be additional controls for the MIDI stuff. But once I realized it wasn't going to work the way I wanted to, I kind of stopped on it. And actually just the other night I was working on the new piece. It'll have 2 knobs, the same touchpad. It might have 1 other button on it as well, but I'll be able to do everything I want. It'll just be more refined. It'll also be cool in a different kind of way.
Okay.
So.
Cool. Anything else? Or does that kind of cover it?
That probably covers it for 10 o'clock at night on a, what is it? What is it? Tuesday?
Today's Wednesday.
Today's Wednesday.
I think. I don't know. Yeah. I'm losing track of the days. Yeah. But I think it is Wednesday.
Speaking of which, tomorrow I'm going to meet one of my customers down in Lancaster, Wisconsin, of all places, and guess what he does? He's a speaker cone manufacturer that supplies speaker cones, I guess, internationally. I've never even knew this existed in Wisconsin, but I'm going there tomorrow because he wants to do some checkway automation for his speaker cones, so he can make sure they're all within tolerance.
Really?
So I'm excited to go see this place because this guy...
And you're going to bring this?
I'm tempted to.
You should.
I'm not supposed to, but I'm like, hey, man. I told him I was kind of into audio, but I don't want him to think I'm... Kaczynski. So we'll see.
You don't want to sound like the rest of these
technically,
guys.
I gotta. My work vehicle's full of scales. I got to, bring down other places. So I may not bring this yet.
Well, you know what? I'll get this uploaded tonight, and you can show him. I'll do it right here from the parking lot. I'll upload it. Hubert's got Starlink, so we'll be good to go.
Rock and roll. Well, it's been nice. I'm glad you hit me up. It's kind of spur of the moment.
Yeah, like I said, I was driving through Wisconsin. I'm way behind. I'm 3 weeks behind schedule of like being out here, and then even just today, I was like multiple hours behind schedule. I was driving through. Troy, our friend, my customer Troy friend, hit me up. He's like, "You're really driving through Wisconsin, and you're not gonna like say hi?" And I was like, "Dude, I'm like behind schedule." I'm like, what's your address? Where are you? He sent me his address as I was driving, and I checked it, and I was like, oh, he's like right down the road. I was like, I'll pop in. And I was there, we're hanging out for a minute, and he's like, dude, take the detour and see Eric. I was like, I'm like, dude, I need to get to where I'm going. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. All right.
Well, he was literally at a crossroads.
And I messaged you
94 to 90, and I just messaged him. I said, if you choose your own adventure and go down I-90, I can meet you in about an hour. If you go the other direction, you're going to head to Minneapolis and miss me. And
it adds like an extra hour to my route, but it's like, you know what? I'm probably the day is kind of screwed anyway for tomorrow, so I'm like, might as well, right?
Right on, man.
So, yeah, I'm actually very glad I did. It was enjoyable hanging out with you. It was enjoyable listening to this. And yeah, for those that have seen the posts and seen the weirdness, it's working. Definitely come check this out. Where will you be this coming year?
The first show I will be at will be Expona in Chicago in April. I will then be at the Red River Shootout down in Oklahoma. That's in May. There's a couple local shows, and I also got my registration in for SVR in July, and that's the only things that I'm set in stone with right now. We'll see. That may change. Got to keep the peace at home too. So
you're gonna have to be in your own free.
This is a totally normal car stereo hobby. So I don't, I don't know why she thinks I'm obsessive or anything.
I live out the whole time. Like even throughout the whole night, we've been making fun of how ridiculous car audio is.
Right. I mean, I don't know why anybody would think that. That's why I just say to people, I'm like, I'm not going to try to explain this to you. Just come into my car and let's take a listen. I'll show you. And then they're
smell this napkin.
Just like they just look at me like you're fucking batshit crazy. So, that's what I enjoy.
All right. Well, Eric, again, thank you for showing us and taking the time and coming out on this absolutely ridiculously freezing night. And yeah, we will, catch you at Red River Shootout or SVR or whatever. We will definitely do a follow-up to see what upgrades and finishing touches you put on it.
Rock and roll.
Cool. I'll see you around.